Hi, everybody. Today I'm joined by Abby Wemimo. Abby is the co-founder and co-CEO of Esusu, the leading financial technology company helping individuals save money, build credit. And prior to Esusu, Abby founded Clean Water for Everyone, a global social venture providing affordable access to clean water for 250,000 plus people in 6 countries. Abby's had his work recognized by the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, Quartz Fortune, and Black Enterprise, recently been named to the Forbes 40 Under 40 list. And I believe, Abby, you are one of only 22 Africans who have actually taken a company public, which is extraordinary. You are one of 22 people in the entire world ever, which is pretty amazing. So maybe let's start there.
We're not public just yet, Sarah. But I think
Going.
on our way there.
Okay, let me correct myself then. You are one of 22 Africans who have built a unicorn.
Precisely.
You do have unicorn status and are on your way to taking a company public, which is really quite extraordinary. So maybe let's start there. Being one of 22 Africans that has ever built a unicorn, which is, we are defining unicorn as having built a company that is worth $1 billion. So maybe let's start with your journey on Esusu. Tell us a bit about what the company does, and focus of the company, and a little bit of your journey from 0 to $1 billion, if that's
Absolutely.
not too much in one
Sarah,
question.
thanks a lot for having me, and such a delight to see other exceptional entrepreneurs here. My name is Wemimo Abbey, and before I talk about the journey to $1 billion in valuation, I think it's important to stay rooted from where I come from and my story. You see, I grew up in the slums of Lagos, Nigeria. I lost my father at the age of 2, and I was raised by my mother and 2 very spirited sisters. And one thing my mother fundamentally believed in was the importance of education. She afforded my school fees to one of the finest high schools in the land, and that's what led me to this magical place called America. My mother had less than an high school degree, and she worked at the post office for 21 years. And during my transition, my mother and I did not have a credit score. We walked into one of the biggest financial institutions to borrow money, and were turned away and had to go borrow money from a predatory lender at over 400% interest rate. In addition to that, my mother pawned my dad's wedding ring. We borrowed money from church members, and that's how we got started in the United States. So really inspired by that experience, my co-founder and I, Samir, we started Esusu on 3 core premises. No matter where you come from, the color of your skin, and particularly your financial identity should not determine where you end up in the world. And the way we make that happen is really simple. We work alongside large real estate owners and operators, and we report on-time rental data to help people establish or build their credit scores. And when people can afford to pay rent, we pair them up with 0 interest loan, so they are not evicted. As a society, we're not solving homelessness backwards. And above all, we've become the forefront leader when it comes to substantiating the S in real estate, the social piece of ESG. So that's what we do. Today, Esusu is present in all 50 states in the United States, serving over 3 million rental units, and then millions of people on the platform. So that's what we do in a nutshell. And when I think and reflect on my journey, trying as much as possible with my co-founder and our incredible team building $1 billion company, it's one that had a lot of challenges, and one that took perseverance and unwavering faith. You see, when we went out there to raise capital, a lot of people didn't believe in the idea that you can actually create a product that's fitting, that help low to medium income people get a fighting chance. We spoke to over 326 investors. All of them said no, and one eventually gave us a fighting chance. And eventually we were able to build a business that has now gone from 13 people in 2019 to close to 200 people, and then evolved into $1 billion company. $1 billion, in my view, I like to tell people, is a mortgage. You have to pay the monthly premiums of outperforming, and providing value, and in my opinion, creating a construct of justice capitalism on this premise that doing well and doing good is by no means mutually exclusive. So that's our modus operandi at Esusu, and I'm happy to take a deep dive, but thanks a lot for having me once again.
We are super excited to talk to you. There's so many threads about what you just shared with us that I want to unravel and talk about. Maybe let's start with the concept of credit building and the idea that you could build a valuable business out of creating a credit history for people who don't normally have a credit history. That's extraordinary in itself. And using a rental model to help people, just like when you have a mortgage, you start to get a credit background, to use the same principles for doing it through rental. Tell us a bit about that idea and what first stimulated it, and why you think it's working and what's been working about it.
Absolutely. So when you look at the construct in our world today, particularly in places like the United States, you're treated like you're guilty until proven innocent. There's a 3-digit number called your credit score that essentially determine the kind of financial product you get. And if you don't have it at all, it could be exclusionary. Case in point, there are over 45 million people in the United States that either have no credit score or what we call a thin file, which means they don't have a lot of activity on their credit profile. And that prevents people from getting leverage, which we know that's what wealth is built on. So when I go down memory lane and think about what we did at Esusu, at the inception of creating this idea, we wanted to just give people a fighting chance. We don't want to relegate them to a 3-digit number. We want to tell much stories with a lot of activities going on in their lives. When we started Esusu, rental data was at its infancy. People had not captured this information, but let me tell you why it's important. Number one, you have roughly 110 million Americans that rent in the United States, and predominantly folks that do not have a wealth building opportunity like a mortgage essentially find themselves in a situation whereby they have to rent. But that data is not factored into the consumer rating agencies to help them establish or build a credit score. Even on the African continent, Nigeria, where I lived, right, in some cases, your credit proximity is a derivative of who you know or the banking relationships you have. So what we were trying to do was change that construct. What are everyday things that you do that's not necessarily captured today? And we wanted to own in on that. Rent played a quintessential role in that. Why? Rent accounted for 30 to 50% of low to medium incomes folks' monthly expenses. And we wanted to capture that information and show their credit worthiness to actually show that they can meet a debt obligation and hopefully unlock more capital and give them a fighting chance. So that's what we ended up doing. And capturing this information has led to the establishment of more credit scores. We've established tens of thousands of credit scores for individuals, and more practically, some of them have now gone on to actually get a mortgage. Some of them have gone on to get a car note so they can have mobility and go get that new job. Some of them have now gotten a credit card, so if they fall behind, they have additional leverage at a reasonable interest rate to give themselves that fighting chance. So that's really the true power of what we did, is really leverage data to tell stories, and hopefully, when done well, unlock quality financial products for folks that will otherwise be left behind. For folks like my mother and I, when we came to the United States, for folks that have been relegated in society and been written off. And I'm glad that we're doing work every day in, day out, to tell their stories and give them an ultimate fighting chance. Because no one wants an handout. No one just wants to be handed out something. Everyone has human agency, and all we need to do is just give them a shot. And that's what we try to do every day at Esusu.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, handouts are not dignified, are they? But being able to have access to capital to be able to improve your opportunities and your chances in life and make things happen is a real leveler. And financial inclusion is potentially one of the biggest issues in our world that's creating inequality within a country, racially, globally. We see it in so many different ways. And I love that you are taking on this problem. I love your own story of connected to that very specific challenge, and building a valuable product to help do those two things. You said just now, Abby, the sense of being able to do good and do well, that very sense of being able to build something that's very valuable. And we talked about Esusu now being worth $1 billion, and at the same time, do good. Tell us, for you, how those two things go together and why they go together, and why it's okay that they go together.
Thanks, Sarah, for that question. I grew up in the slums of Lagos, and there's some people that I knew when I said I wanted to come to the United States, or said entrepreneurship will be the path to go, that essentially laughed at me. I said it was a joke. And when I look back and I think about justice capitalism, this premise of doing well and doing good, I feel as though it is my responsibility, given where I come from, to create win-win-win solutions. I'm always thinking about what's the win for the folks buying our product, which is the landlord or the operator. What is the win for the renters that essentially get our services so they can keep a roof over their heads? That's Esusu's mission at the end of the day. And then what's the win for society at large? So hopefully what we do at Esusu, we're not solving homelessness backwards and giving people that financial identity. I think it's incumbent on us. It's not enough to just found a company that's generating revenue. What is far more important, or what is far more exciting, is when I wake up every morning and know that there's a kid in the slums of Lagos, Nigeria, through what we are doing, can believe that because Wemimo Abbey and the rest of the team did it, I have an opportunity to do it one day. If there's a kid, right, in the slums of Kibera, right, that says, wow, I have a dream and I have this great idea and I want to pursue it, I can not only create a business that's focused on the status quo, which is the bottom line, I can create a business that can help transform my slum and give my people a better chance. If there's a kid, right, in the slums of Joburg that has a grand idea, to transform Southern Africa, when I hope I am a beacon of hope that says anything is possible. If Wemimo Abbey can grow up in the slums and make it happen, in a very thoughtful way, and create solutions that create this win-win-win construct, that's the ultimate goal. I am who I am because of the folks that came before me. I am who I am because of all the hard work. A lot of people of color, Black folks, Africans, the suffering, the toil, of what they've gone through. I'm a product of that. And I want others coming behind to be able to get that inspiration and say, you know what, I can do it. If he can do it, by every means necessary, I can do it. I just want to serve as a beacon of hope, and toe that line of creating a business that can create that win-win-win construct. So that's what we need in society today. Building businesses that just generate shareholder value is not enough. We need businesses that generate stakeholder value. We need businesses that think about justice capitalism. The current construct of capitalism is not working. That's why you have a large Gini coefficient today, the gap between the rich and the poor. It's not sustainable. It's like building a mansion on a sinking sand, and we need to do better. We need to start creating businesses that think about how do we create a win, right, for the people paying us? How do we get a win for the people that are going to benefit? And how do we create a win for society in general? Because what's the purpose? Eventually, our rent in this life will expire. And when you're on your deathbed, what questions do you want to be asked? Is it how much wealth you amassed or how much lives you impacted? For me, it's the latter. And that's the beacon of hope I want to serve as for folks around the world, particularly the African continent, particularly Black and other people of color around the world, to say, if he can do it, I can sure do it.
Oh, I'm inspired. And that's really why we are doing what we're doing, and what this video series is all about actually is this sense of how do we venture forward? How do we keep moving our world forward? How do we keep thinking about building a better world and actively putting our money where our mouth is? And you are an example of someone who is doing just that, and building something for the future, trying to make our world a better and solve some of our world's biggest problems. Tell us, Abby, about, we talked at the beginning about getting to where you are today has not been an easy journey, and you've had to overcome a lot of barriers. And you told us, you know, the first time you got investment, you pitched yourself over 300 times. Tell us how you've turned some of your barriers or some of those challenges into breakthroughs, and maybe tell us a few of your breakthrough stories.
Absolutely. You know, when I reflect and look at where we came from and a lot of the rejections, you know, I grew up in an household whereby a lot of people didn't really think anything of me, right? Or folks from where I come from, you know, were not expected to do the things that we're doing. And it reminds me of the quote of Alan Turing. You know, it is those that you don't expect anything of that do things that you can't imagine. And for me, it was always important. Every no is a not yet. Every no is an opportunity for me to seek guidance and say, what can we tweak and do better? And every no motivates my co-founder and I, Samir, because we always want to get back up and prove people wrong. But we don't have anything to fall back on. It's not like we have a father, a family that has a trust waiting for us. No, all we have to do is fall forward, right? There's nothing to fall back on. So those are some of the mentality, and I'll share a story, you know, that sort of rings through, particularly in this case. There's a diner, you know, probably the equivalent of Nando's in South Africa, in Nigeria, the equivalent of Mr. Biggs, you know, in Kenya, the equivalent of Vida Cafe, where my co-founder and I got our first contracts from my alma mater. The contract was a $20,000 contract. We had over leveraged ourselves. We had over $100,000 in credit card debt that was compounding growing interest every month. And we got this deal done, but how it works is you get your cash later. So we didn't have money to pay for an hotel room. And it was in the northwestern corner of the United States. So my co-founder and I went to the equivalent of, you know, Nando's or Mr. Biggs or Vida Cafe to essentially work all nights like we always do and catch a plane to San Francisco in the United States to raise additional capital and even face more rejection. So that night, because we're not perpetual motion machines and we're human beings, we fell asleep. And lo and behold, at 2 a.m. in the morning, we got kicked out of that particular diner, that restaurant. And rightfully so. The manager said he was going to get fired if he didn't take that action, and we understood where it was coming from. You know, we stepped out in sub-zero degrees weather, and we're kicked out. And you know, that experience of getting kicked out of a Denny's or a restaurant really humbles us every day, my co-founder and I. You know, the $1 billion, everyone is celebrating it, but we keep ourselves grounded because we still see ourselves as that kid from the slums of Lagos, Nigeria, or I still see myself as that kid that was kicked out of a diner. And all we want to do essentially is make sure that that's not the norm. We want to correct that myth that there's 0.2% of capital that go to folks that look like me and other folks around the world. That's not right. It's a travesty. We only have 22 Africans that have been able to build a $1 billion business out of over 1 billion people. That's a travesty, and we shouldn't settle. But my job, in the wise words of an artist I respect, you know, Didier William, is, you know, representation is not liberation. Representation is currency. And the way I'm going to spend that currency is to crack the door open for folks that are coming behind me so they get a fighting chance and they have a seat at the table. The way I'm going to spend my currency is if folks like me are not at the table, is to pull a chair for them and make sure they get a chance and be at the table. The way I'm going to spend my currency is to create businesses that are justice capitalism, right? A business that essentially creates a win-win outcome for all involved. Those are the kind of businesses I want to build, and those are the things that essentially propel us forward. And regardless of the strives and struggles and tribulations we've gone through, ultimately the work still continues.
How did you get that first investor to say yes? What precipitated that breakthrough?
The first major investor that led around the financing was Acumen America, founded by Jacqueline Novogratz, and she had a wonderful investment and led by a lady called Eliza Golden Rowdy. She's now married, so she has 3 names now, and then Amon, a partner. I think, and their purpose is simple. They really wanted to build businesses that can have an impact in the world and generate returns. So they led our official seed round of financing back in 2019, and the rest is history. And to see we got our first seed round of financing in 2019, and fast forward to 2022, in just short 3 years, was able to build the business from sub $10 million in value to over $1 billion. Shows a testament of when you invest in businesses that not only do well but can outperform, and have mission-aligned investors. The sky is not the limit, rather the launchpad.
That's really extraordinary, and I think I maybe first met you in 2019, and you were just starting out. I think
Yes.
I think it was 2019, right?
It was.
And you were just at the very beginning of your journey, and that is an incredible thing to think. In the last 3 years, you now have a company worth over $1 billion. And am I right? Am I getting this right?
Yeah.
In the last round was led by SoftBank.
Correct. The last round of financing was led by SoftBank, and the company continues to do well despite this tough macroeconomic conditions. And yeah, when I stopped by your house in 2019, and you were very, very gracious and welcomed a host of entrepreneurs at your house, it served as a piece of inspiration. You've had your own fair share of success building a business that you successfully exited. And I always leverage those experiences as a source of inspiration, as a source of, if she can do it, hopefully, we have it in us to do it also. So it's been a wonderful journey. And yeah, you're right. I think when we came to your house, it was 2 months or 3 months after we got our first round of financing at $1.6 million. And fast forward today, we've raised over $144 million, and having impact around the country, in the United States and around the world. We have employees in 5 continents, predominantly the African continent, and we're incredibly proud of that because we're acting local and thinking global.
I love that. That's really smart. In the next couple of years, how do you see for-profit companies doing good for the world? And maybe what issues do you think should be top of mind for business leaders?
Now, I think in the next sort of decade, because I love to think long term, when any businesses, the big businesses, publicly traded business, or anyone starting a new business, if you're not thinking about the concepts of justice capitalism, this win-win construct, it's a big miss, because those are the business that are going to stand the test of time. The business that are not only generating shareholder value, but generating stakeholder value and having a profound impact in life. So those are the business that are going to stand the test of time. And we're seeing it today, day in, day out, of businesses that are successful. The biggest trends, mega trends I see that will sort of outperform in coming years, I think financial technology plays a quintessential role to unlock access and leverage. The world, the United States particularly, was built on leverage, cheap debt. The African continents have been stifled of expensive debts, and hopefully we are moving towards a more steady ground where we can get cheap debt to essentially move the frontiers of that wonderful continent forward. Number two, I think environment will be a key role. We all live in this enclave called Earth. And if we destroy it and we're not thoughtful about the development of it while being balanced, not creating policies that essentially cripples other parts of the world, especially the African continent, but rather having a balanced approach will be key for us to be successful. And then the third piece is just workforce training. It's not enough to have groundbreaking ideas, but it's important for us to essentially rescale and retrain folks to essentially have the necessary acumen to contribute their own humble quota to the change imminent in the world. Number four is artificial intelligence. We've seen a huge panacea of different tools, conversational AI companies that essentially automate the way we think today. And then the last piece I will talk about is, because at the end of the day, we all need to think about health. I think human genome, when you think about the last sort of pandemic we had, which was the COVID-19 crisis, and the pace at which we got a vaccine is absolutely incredible. So advances in health, and I think a lot of innovation is going to come out of the African continent. Kudos to the South African scientists that essentially came up with vaccines for one of the renditions of the virus. And these are some of the innovations we're going to be seeing out of the African continent. I'm really, really, really excited, about what's going to happen in Africa. Thinking about what M-Pesa did to the world, and then that gave birth to things like Venmo and Cash App in the United States. Thinking about medical breakthrough of how we Africans contributed our own humble quota to actually challenge and trace and create vaccines for the one of the greatest pandemics we've seen in our lifetime. And I expect us to do things in artificial intelligence. I expect us to do things in reskilling and workforce training, because we're the youngest continent on the surface of the earth. So many opportunities at this point that's untapped. When I think about the continent, the growth is absolutely unlimited, and it just gets me so much excitement. And throughout my visits and throughout, as we even think about Esusu, I'm excited to get involved in the near future and continue to hire folks out of the continent, and eventually, hopefully, have the opportunity to expand the work we're doing at Esusu in Mother Africa.
That would be very cool. What advice would you give to? We've got some African entrepreneurs joining us live, and hopefully many more will watch this once it's uploaded. But what advice would you give to specifically maybe to African entrepreneurs who do want to make a difference in their communities, their cities, their nations, and want to contribute to building the continent? What advice would you have for them?
I think advice one is build solutions or build innovations that live beyond your individualistic concerns to the broader needs of society. I think when you think big and think of ideas that radically transform the status quo, because the continent has so much opportunity. Number two, perseverance. You will get a lot of no's. A no's is a not now. A no might be the investors don't comprehend your idea, but also be an active listener. If there are things investors tell you that are true, after strong reflection, tweak it. Be ever evolving in nature. That's one of our cultural values at Esusu. It's just continue to evolve your mindset, and that would set a strong foundation for you to build something exceptional. The last thing I would say, which is important, is this concept of what Esusu stands on. If you want to go fast, you go alone. But if you want to go far, you fundamentally go together. You need to come up with a group of folks, exceptional people, to help you build something spectacular. If you're thinking about ideas and you want to be the person celebrated or go at it alone, that's a short-term mindset. You need to think about how you get the best folks to work alongside you to create something that folks can imagine. And there's a lot of opportunities on the African continent. And, if you just, heed on those three core principles, I think the sky's the limit.
Great advice. Are there any questions that you find African entrepreneurs are looking to you for answers for with regards to how they break into entrepreneurship?
think the most notorious one is obviously access to capital.
Mm.
There are a lot of ideas out there, but a lot of people are far away from the coffers of how folks essentially raise capital. So I think building solid relationships with a plethora of people, not building transactional relationships, but rather relationships that goes beyond, hey, I need to ask you something, ask you for a favor, a relationship that's rooted in just getting to know someone in a genuine way so they are motivated to help you out. Other advices we get is like, how do you get from 0 to 1, right? How do you build a pre-seed, seed stage company and then get it to $1 billion? And it's really simple. You got to generate value for your clients. For us, we created a win-win construct. For us, we partnered with large institutions that we knew would stand the test of time because that's the fundamentals we wanted to build our business on. One of the most notorious questions is also, how do you find product market fit? My advice is spend as little money as possible, experiment, and be obsessed with the feedback your clients, especially the big ones, give you. One of our biggest clients gave us advice, and it took us close to 9 months to essentially check all those advice and get them done. And we came back to them and said, we've done what you asked us to do. And today they're still our biggest clients. They continue to give us business and we continue to learn perpetually from them. So, those would be some of the things: product market fit, access to capital, and just this dire need to learn from your customers to find product market fit and continue to evolve. You cannot stand still. Any business that stands still, right, will not have an opportunity to be successful in this landscape. The last thing I would say is, yes, we're all people of color predominantly on the African continent, but build diverse teams. Build teams whereby women are represented, because a diverse team would outperform day in, day out. And I'm not saying this from a rhetoric perspective. Majority of our leadership team at Esusu are women. We have over 55% of women on our leadership team. A lot of our investors are also women and people of color. A lot of our vendors, major spend, go to minority and women and diverse folks. So be intentional, be thoughtful from how much you spend on with vendors, from the folks you put on your board, from people you take money from the leadership team you curate, and the entire organization. Be intentional, because every step you make is an opportunity to set an example that those people that have been relegated by society can actually do things that society cannot necessarily comprehend right now. So those are some of the things I would, strongly advise. It is the road less traveled. It's not the easiest, but long term, it will pay strong dividends.
I think that's also really interesting advice about fundraising too, actually, because you've had huge success at aligning with people who have your values or who care about the things that you care about. And often I think one of the misfits with getting capital and finding a pathway, because we all have to find a path, right? And it's a hard journey. It's not an easy journey. But I think that's really interesting advice. Can you find people who care about what you care about? Can you find alliances that people might get what you are doing, and that they might connect with you and care about what you care about and want to build with you? Because ultimately, investors become your partners, become your business partners, and become
and also hold you accountable. Like,
yes.
if you go out there and say you want to build a business that impacts the world, they're going to say, what's the impact metric, right? So it's not just enough, right, to take money from people. And if you don't take money from folks that you're aligned with, then if things are not going well, people show their true colors, right? I'll give you an example. When we raised that seed round of financing, the assets under management of every investor that invested in that round of financing, seed and probably through Series A, was probably less than 100 million. Today, if you are combining all the asset under management, it's over $1 billion, and they've raised more capital as a result of the stories they're able to tell with our own company also. That's what we need. That is what we need. It's like the rising tide lifts all boats. They took a bet on us, they held us accountable, and if we do well, they do well. It's this idea of collectivism once again.
Yeah, I love it. Do you think it's really important for Africans to physically get on a plane and go where the money is? Or do you think it's possible to find local capital? Well, how do you think about that? Because obviously most of the world's venture capital is sitting in the United States. Not all of it, obviously, but most of it. What do you think's important for Africans? Because every business needs some fuel in the tank, right? What do you think about that? What's your perspective on it?
You know, my grandmother always says charity begins at home. And I think it's important for us to map out the folks that are investing on the African continent first, right? And say, okay, hey, who are the folks investing on the African continent? Have I spoken to them? And then the next layer is sort of, the United States, Europe, and other parts of the world. I believe in creating a funnel, right? Create a funnel. And I'm also a realist, right? The truth is, it's easier to get access to capital because it's abundant in the United States of America. That's just the truth. I don't want to give this false premise here on this call. Well, I think, you can start because by mapping out who are the people funding ideas like mine on the continent, either they're on the West, either they're on the continent, right? And then really try as much as possible to map those things out. So the way I would do it is treat it like a sales funnel. Who are the people, the top 100 people on the African continent, the top 100 people that have invested in the United States in the same product, and then Europe and other parts of the world. And then you meticulously, like a sales funnel, you talk to people, you get their thoughts. And then you can also do comparisons. You can talk to someone, a major investor on the African continent. If you don't like the valuation, you don't think it's worthwhile, you can go to someone in New York or in Palo Alto and get their thoughts. You can do things virtually, build relationships, and eventually, go to see people. We live in a global world today. There are businesses like Flood Away, right, that have raised a lot of capital from outside one of the most valuable companies on the African continent. There are companies like Chipper Cash, right? All these founders are friends of mine, and they built successful business even attracting outside, capital. So, the truth is the status quo at the moment is like a lot of the capital come from the United States. Let's just be honest. And you follow the money and go where it is sort of allocated. Or be that as it may, I think it's also important for us to not overlook people on the African continent. At least you can say, like, I tried. Have those conversations, compare notes, or just mapping things out and be meticulous about your approach will go a long way. It's always good to go into situations with a plan rather than without it. But to answer your question in a succinct manner, a lot of the money is coming from the United States. Follow the money, but as well give African investors that really care about you an opportunity to invest also if they do choose to take that route.
I love that advice. And I think that's really helpful for thinking about building your investor funnel and capital funnel, just like you would think about building a sales funnel, being just as ruthless about how you think about going after the capital you need to put fuel in your engine to build your business, just like you would for driving revenue. That's super helpful. Abby, what is one thing, if you could go back in time, which we know we can't, but if we could, what is one thing you'd now go back and tell your earlier self? Maybe that boy in a slum, or maybe even tell yourself when you were just starting your business and just starting out. What do you know now that you would share with your younger self?
It's a very thoughtful question. I think what I know now about myself is I am enough. I am enough. There's a lot of externalities in society and the world at large that make you feel as though you're not enough. There's a lot of verbiage, there's a lot of lingo. But I believe that we are all put on this construct called Earth to do something. And then I think half the battle is believing that we're enough to do it. Half the battle is believing that we're the embodiments of infinite possibilities. And half the battle is just knowing that the path has been paved for us and it's ours to take. The things that hinder us are insecurities and some obstacles thrown our way. But if we walk into every room unapologetically confident and say, I am enough, regardless of the rejections, our mental health will be better. I think that's something, if I go back, you say, look, the sun will rise again. There'll be good days, there'll be bad days, but I am enough.
I think that's true for all of us, but I think it's especially true for women and people of color who generally feel like they're not enough, that we are not enough, that somehow we had to be better, we had to be smarter, we had to be faster, we had to be perfect in order to succeed or reach any kind of level of success. And I think that's very powerful advice. I think if we believe it and we act like it, we will be it. And I think that's a really, really helpful comment. Thank you. I know there are people on the other side of the screen who are just itching to ask you some questions too. So let me open it up. We've just got a few of our entrepreneurs who are here. So folks, maybe if you've got a question, maybe just maybe if someone will kick us off, and we'll just take these last couple of minutes to see if there are any questions that people would like answered. Ego, go for it.
Hello, Abby. I'm Ego. I'm also Nigerian. And you might be proud to be able to say that, as Nigerians have a way of messing up Nigeria's reputation around the world. So congratulations to you, and what an amazing business. And I couldn't be prouder. Literally, I'm going to go around talking about how I got to talk to you, I got to listen to you. I just wanted to say that the idea of using rental as a way of understanding a person's ability to pay, I think is like phenomenal. How did that idea come to you? I mean, because as somebody who rented for a long time in London, you know, no one would ever take me seriously. And I would always say, but I pay my rent every single month without fail. Surely that has to account for something. But yeah, it was never recorded as a method of, you know, a credit score. How did that idea come?
Thanks a lot, Ego, and I appreciate your kind words. You know, when we started Esusu started as a savings business, and we really wanted to address this issue of getting people in a collective to save money and build wealth together. And creating that construct, one thing we learned off the bat was people were not earning enough. Particularly in the United States, there's 76% of people that live paycheck to paycheck. And a lot of them are $400 away from an emergency. So if they lose their job or have a timing difference in whatever cash flow they have, it's a major risk. So to that end, when we created that savings product, the biggest feedback was, if I had enough money, I will save. If I get paid enough, I would save. I want to save. I want to have a nest egg, but I'm just not paid enough. My obligations are way, way too much. And the biggest issue, you heard my mom and my story, we didn't have credit. The issue is the systems we have is not designed to look at people in a very, very comprehensive manner. The idea that I have to go into debt to prove my credit worthiness is backwards. I have to get a credit card. I have to get some sort of loan obligation to then prove to you that I can pay is ludicrous, right? So for us, we thought about it and said, look, what are things people do day in, day out that we can incorporate without them having to go through the humiliation of the rejection every day? So We had conversations with them, and people gave us that feedback. Help me get access to cheap debt. And we looked around and we said, wow, everyone or most of people, if you're not, homeless, have a roof over their head. And for folks that don't have a house or can't afford to build a house, they're trying as much as possible to go on that journey. So how about we capture that expense, which would amount to be their largest monthly expense, to show that they can actually meet a debt obligation. Look, you can decide not to pay your credit card bill. You can decide not to pay that payment on a Gucci bag, but to keep a roof over your head, 95 or 99.99% of people, if they can afford it, will pay that obligation, because no one or most of us do not want to be on the streets, hopefully without a mental health challenge. So that's what we thought about. What is truly going to show people's creditworthiness, their ability to pay? And rental data was one glaring one. And we created the plumbing to capture that data, clean it, make sure it's compliant with the regulations in the United States, and then report it in a thoughtful manner. So that's how the idea came about. It was listening to our customers, giving us feedback, and not jingoistic about our own approach, rather embrace what their main challenge was, which is getting access to cheap debt. And our strategy at Esusu is that, how do we leverage data to unlock quality financial products? So that's what we're built on right now. And it's a derivative of just listening to our customers.
It's ingenious. And I take it you're going to take it across the world. It doesn't have to just be the States, right? Everywhere.
I tell people we are currently acting local. Local is the United States, and we're going global. So, think about a world whereby on the African continent, you have a global credit score, a score that can be used on your rental data and other activities. So next time you're in Lagos, right, you can get access to good credits and good leverage. If you go to Joburg, you can get the same. If you go to, Nairobi, you can get the same thing. If you go to, Accra, you can get the same thing. That's the vision. Right now, we're building a doghouse, and eventually will translate into the White House, or, in a more global scale, we're summiting Kilimanjaro and making our way through Everest.
Love it. Sandras.
Abby, your story is really, really inspiring. I grew up in the slums as well, Zambia. So to hear this, it's really, really great, and well done on building a unicorn in just a few years. My question is, with your experience raising money from seed all the way to now, like SoftBank and raising all of that, what have you learned? Like, if you're to help those of us who want to learn from you, like, what have you learned? What would be the things you do differently? If you had to raise again now, what are the steps you'd follow? I know you alluded to some of it, like treating it like a funnel. What else would you add on if somebody wants to raise? What do investors want to see?
So, congratulations. I'd love to learn more about your business. And, it's always hard to come from the slums and, build something, because the positions that society thinks that you're going to end up, you're exploring the road less traveled. And I applaud you. The good news is I don't like to answer this question in sort of a fluffy, aspirational way. One of the things when we raised capital, closed this Series B round of financing, we actually created a playbook on how we did it. So by being part of this conversation, I will share that link with Sarah so she can share with everyone on this call and the entire network. And we paid people to essentially write the process on how we did it. So it's not this fluffy, aspirational thing. Right, so each and every one of you get how we did it. So that's number one. But if I go back in retrospect, I think preparation was important. I used to walk on Wall Street and then do consulting at places like PricewaterhouseCoopers and Goldman Sachs. And one of the things I always think about, what can I control, right? So making sure you have a data room of all the materials that you anticipate investors will ask for. Transparently, it was a little easier for us because that was like 6th or 7th time doing it at that point. So we knew, and I used to do that for a living when I used to work at corporate America. So I would acknowledge that privilege also. But if you don't have those experiences, just ask yourself, what would investors ask for? and how can I make sure I'm not scrambling and creating things during that process? So you have this esoteric thing, which is a glorified, Dropbox or Google Drive. Once again, I don't want us to use complex language, where you put key materials, your financial model, your business plan, your projections, your clients, the traction you've had in the marketplace, and you just organize it in folders. That's really what it is. Some people call it VDR, which is a visual data room, a data room. Don't get confused by all those big words. It's essentially a glorified folder of materials on your company. So if you can control for that and you're not reactive, you're already 60% there. The other thing is you need to make sure you have references, especially for your business. You need to make sure you have clients on standby that can say, you know what, I gave them feedback, they took it, especially in the early stage, and I think they have something going on here. If you have clients that are obsessed with your product, let them talk to investors. So it's not just you, right? Show them, don't just tell them, right? So that would be another approach I would take. And then the third thing, as you go on this journey, is just pick people that are also aligned. We had situations whereby we had multiple investors that wanted to invest in the company, and we said no to some of them. And do what's in the best interest of, the entire company, not just yourself. Also, so I would sort of follow up with Sarah and share a detailed how we did it, so the steps. There's a roadmap on the things you need to prepare. So each and every one of you on this call will get that document. So it's not just high-level aspirational things. I like grounding ourselves in reality and a playbook that you can leverage. So I'll be sure to share that, but just be prepared. The things you can control, do it. So that way you're not scrambling, and then you can sort of manage the situation. And going back to, what I would change is if you know the power of your business, you're not going to waver, right? You've planned, you come here. If an investor said no, great. Not now, we'll talk later. So that should be your approach, and treat it like a sales funnel. Don't take anything too personal, and it's brutal. Sometimes you're gonna be like, why that person say no? Sometimes they string you along, but get back up, do it again, get back up, do it again. And in your mind, you'll be like, I know I'm ready. I know I'm prepared. I did everything I can do. And I controlled everything I can control, and that's really half the battle.
Wow, that PDF or whatever form that's coming to us in, Abby, that's going viral around the continent. We will make sure of it. That will be exceptionally valuable to many of our entrepreneurs and the wider entrepreneurial network here on the continent. So thank you. That would be fantastic. Anyone else? We maybe got time for one last question before we wrap up here. Has anyone else got anything else they would like to ask Abby?
Sure, go ahead, Claudia.
All right. Hi, Abby. How are you? I just had a quick one. I remember I just bumped into you very briefly because I didn't manage to go that year on the SOCAP group, on the social capital meeting. So I just wanted to know, because being, like the essence of Black Mamba is a social and environmental business. Basically, that's the foundation and like doing good to the world. Did you find, or have you found that there is a big difference, a substantial difference between the way you fundraise when you're doing something which main purpose is to actually challenge the status quo on the social environmental aspects and not? Or because I've always get this dilemma, should I look for, funding and how to grow Black Mamba more on the impact investment perspective or towards just a normal sort of investment just because we're doing good in the world as part of our business itself?
That's a very thoughtful question, and good to see you again. And hopefully you're still active on the SOCAP group. I think, wow, that was a long time ago. That was 5 years ago. 2018. Something that's a little contrarian from my perspective is impact investors are actually the toughest investors, right? Because they've been given the money by institutions or family offices that say, look, I want you to invest in exceptional entrepreneurs, but they can also generate a return. So they have something to prove, right? So I don't know if you've had my impact investors are probably one of the toughest investors we have, because they're asking for a lot of things I have to go recreate. And then the sort of, general market investors are like, yeah, did you outperform? Didn't you outperform? It's a very, very binary conversation. So what I would challenge you to think through is my product essentially adding value for society at large? I don't want us to get relegated to like this impact business. Yes, Esusu is having a lot of impact in the world, but like, yes, we can also hold our own on companies that don't consider themselves impact businesses in our vertical, and we outperform, right? You want to say, we happen to be an impact company, but we lead with performance, right? We happen to be a women-led company, but we outperform, and that's actually one of our strengths, right? So it's it's not the sole reason from my vantage point. It is a reason, but you need to actually think about the product on how we driving value. And then your impact lens become your sort of differentiator, your strategic advantage in the marketplace. Because look, if you have, just think about it, if you have a business that does exactly what we do, right? And we are focused on leveraging data to create more opportunities. I'll give you an example. So we have a lot of businesses in the Esusu's vertical that do what we do and sort of copied what we do, but they can provide zero interest loans. You know why? We go to high net worth people, philanthropic institutions, and say, look, you're interested in solving homelessness. Let's take a portion of your givings, right, and invest it in a pot whereby you can keep a roof over people's heads, right? People that are just purely chasing market return can't compete against that. That's a competitive advantage for us. So our impact lens is a competitive advantage that got us to $1 billion business. So what I would think about is, how does your business drive value, and how can you use your impact approach as a core competitive advantage? So when you go to investors and say, look, our business outperforms, we grow 5x year over year since inception, 350%, great. But what makes us special from the competition is we have this impact lens that others do not. So Sarah would be like, wow, you outperform, and then you have a heart for the world. You know what that combo is? A head for business and a heart for the world wins every time, right? So I would lead with the performance of the business and say, oh, by the way, we also happen to be an impact company, because that's the right thing to do. Those are how businesses will be successful in the world, on a go-forward basis. So that's what I would lead with. And to your question about investors, I would go to market investors and test yourself and say, look, am I adding value? And then impact investors will follow suit. But don't get it wrong, impact investors can be tough. And rightfully so. They have a point to prove. They want to show they're picking businesses that generate value and have a lot of impact in the world. So you'll be surprised, right? SoftBank invested in us, and we're an impact-based company, right? And we're $1 billion business. We're probably a very few, probably one or five on the continents that will consider ourselves an impact-based company that has gone to this fit. So, and our approach is like, we're also very savvy business people, and that's okay.
I think that's fantastic advice. And then it's indisputable, right? I mean, that's the power of doing good and doing well. It's really, really hard to dispute that doing good doesn't make sense if you also do well and also lead. I think that's brilliant advice. I mean, we could definitely talk for hours. You are a wealth of inspiration, a wealth of knowledge. You certainly have inspired us all today. Thank you so much for sharing your journey, for putting a face to a company that is doing great work, and for being a face for us on the continent. Thank you so much. Abby, where can people, if they want to stay in touch with you or want to follow you, what's the best way for people to stay in touch?
You can stay in touch on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn, so reach out to me on LinkedIn. It's just my name, Wemimo Abbey. Really happy to help out. I will follow up with those materials. Like I said, I've sent it to Sarah, and she's going to distribute it to everyone. And I'll just end with a parting word. This journey is hard. Sometimes that you wake up and you're like, why am I doing this? Just give yourself grace. I know it's incredibly painful. Sometimes you don't want to get out of bed, and it's not rosy. you're juggling a lot. Like you're a juggler. But there's nothing more rewarding than entrepreneurship. There's nothing more rewarding than creating something that fundamentally could impact the world. So please do not stop. Please be caught trying. Please, when you fall down 7 times, get back up again. And when you look at yourself in the mirror, even during the bad days, I had 3 hours of sleep this morning. I still had to show up here. Just tell yourself you're enough, and you're truly the embodiment of infinite possibilities. Just say that every day, because it's really, really hard. And above all, when you get tired, give yourself grace, because it's a marathon, not a race.
Wow. Thank you so much. What a great word to end on. And we're going to now go and let you get some sleep. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, folks. I'll send that stuff. Let's keep on doing the work we're doing. Take good care.
Take care. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.